Okay, so let's get into it. Today we're diving into the world of big tobacco.
Big tobacco.
Yeah, specifically British American tobacco.
Oh, BR?
BAT, as you might know them. And we're looking at a Motley Fool article that makes a pretty bold claim. Even though cigarette sales are dropping, BIT might be a surprising investment opportunity.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
That's a bold statement.
It is. So are they blowing smoke, or is there some fire behind this strategy?
Right.
So this Motley Fool piece argues that BIT is poised for growth thanks to those new nicotine products we've been hearing so much about and some strategic pricing moves. But we're going to unpack all of that and see if it really holds up.
Yeah, because, declining cigarette sales, that's got to be a major headwind for these companies.
Exactly.
How are they getting around that?
Well, first things first, let's talk about those declining cigarette sales. The article highlights a pretty dramatic drop in the U.S. market, especially in 2022 and 2023. It was even worse than the downturn during the Great Recession.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So is this like a global thing?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Is this just an American thing, or are people around the world kind of stubbing out their cigarettes?
Yeah, what's driving this trend beyond just inflation?
Yeah.
There's got to be more to it.
Well, the article throws out some eye-opening numbers. Premium cigarette volume plummeted by 12% year over year
12%.
in both those years.
Oh, wow. That's a huge hit.
Yeah,
That suggests that something bigger is happening here.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you'd think that a company like BA, which is so deeply rooted in that market, would be in serious trouble. But here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
Despite this drop in cigarette sales, BATs have managed to keep its revenue remarkably stable
Stable.
over the past 5 years.
Wow. So how are they pulling that off?
Yeah, are they just magically conjuring up profits from thin air?
Right.
Not quite magic, but they are using some strategic maneuvers. The article credits two main factors. First, they've been steadily raising prices to offset those lower sales volumes.
Okay. The classic charge, more for less strategy.
Yeah, but can that really work in the long run?
Right? Won't people just eventually say enough is enough?
Yeah, and switch to something cheaper or just quit altogether.
Right. Exactly.
So that's why their second strategy is so important. They've been focusing on international markets where smoking rates might be higher or regulations less stringent to compensate for some of those losses in the U.S.
This is like they're playing a global game of chess.
Yeah, shifting their pieces around to stay one step ahead.
Makes sense. Diversify your markets and you're less vulnerable to a single point of failure.
Exactly. But even with those tactics, you'd think they'd be scrambling to find a way out of this shrinking cigarette market.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where their big bet comes in.
Yeah.
They're investing heavily in what the article calls new age nicotine products.
Okay.
We're talking about things like Velo pouches, Vuse vaporizers, and Glow heat not burn devices. They're basically trying to capture the next generation of nicotine users with these sleek, high-tech alternatives.
So instead of fighting the tide, they're trying to ride a new wave.
Exactly. That's actually pretty clever. But let's break this down for our listeners who might not be familiar with these products. What are they and how are they different from good old-fashioned cigarettes?
Sure. Let's start with Vuse vaporizers. So they work by heating a liquid that contains nicotine, turning it into a vapor that the user inhales. And they're often marketed as a less harmful alternative to cigarettes because you're not burning tobacco and inhaling all those nasty combustion products.
Oh, so it's all about that vapor. Okay, what about those Velo pouches? I've seen ads for them, but I never really understood what they were.
Yeah, Velo pouches are a form of smokeless tobacco. They're these little pouches that you tuck between your gum and lip, and they slowly release nicotine. They're discreet, there's no smoke or vapor, and they're often flavored to make them more appealing.
Okay, so that makes sense. And finally, we have Glow heat not burn devices.
Right.
What's the deal with those?
Glow devices are kind of a hybrid between cigarettes and vaporizers. They heat up these special tobacco sticks to a temperature high enough to release nicotine and flavor, but not high enough to actually cause combustion. Oh.
So you're still getting that tobacco experience, but with potentially fewer harmful chemicals.
Gotcha. So BAT is basically covering all its bases.
Yeah.
Vaping, smokeless tobacco, and this heat not burn technology. It's like they're creating a whole buffet of nicotine options for consumers.
Exactly. And the article highlights some pretty impressive numbers to support this strategy. Revenue from these new nicotine products has skyrocketed from $780 million in the first half of 2020 to whopping $2.2 billion in the first half of 2024.
Wow. That's almost tripled in just 4 years.
Yeah.
You have to admit, that's a pretty compelling growth story.
Yeah, it is.
But are these products actually living up to the hype? Are they attracting new users, or are they just appealing to existing smokers who are looking for something different?
Right, that's the big question.
That's $1 million question.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to explore further.
Exactly. Yeah, are these new products just attracting the same smokers, or are they bringing in a whole new crowd who might never have picked up a traditional cigarette? Right. It's a good question, and honestly, the article doesn't really get into that too much.
Yeah.
But it does raise some interesting questions about the bigger picture.
Like what?
Well, for instance, if these new products are truly less harmful, like they're marketed to be,
Right.
could they actually lead to a decline in smoking-related illnesses?
That would be incredible.
Right, that would be a game changer.
Yeah. But even if they're less risky, they still contain nicotine, which is highly addictive.
Of course.
So are we just trading one form of addiction for another?
Right, are we just replacing one problem with another?
Yeah, that's a debate that's likely to continue for quite some time.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's something for you as a potential investor to consider.
Right.
Are you comfortable investing in a company that's still profiting from nicotine addiction, even if it's in a potentially less harmful form?
That's a tough question.
It is.
There's no easy answer.
There isn't. And speaking of tough questions, let's talk about the challenges BAT might face as it tries to push further into this new nicotine market.
Okay, what kind of challenges are we talking about?
Well, I think one of the biggest hurdles is regulation. I mean, governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to approach these new products.
Yeah, that's true. Some countries are embracing them.
Right, as a harm reduction tool.
Exactly, while others are cracking down worried about potential health risks.
Right, or the possibility of them becoming a gateway to traditional smoking, especially for young people.
Yeah, that's a big concern.
So BT's going to have to navigate that very carefully if they want to succeed.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a regulatory maze, for sure.
Uh.
Imagine trying to launch a product globally when each country has its own set of rules and restrictions.
Yeah, it should be a logistical nightmare.
It would. And it's not just about regulations.
Right.
There's also the whole issue of public perception.
Okay.
Will consumers buy into the idea that these new products are a better alternative to cigarettes?
Right, or will they just remain skeptical?
Yeah, seeing them as just another way for tobacco companies to hook people on nicotine.
Right, they've got to build trust.
They do.
They need to be transparent.
And show that they're not just trying to pull the wool over people's eyes.
Exactly. They've got to prove that they're committed to offering these less harmful alternatives.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the competition.
Oh, yeah.
The tobacco industry is notoriously fierce.
It is.
And BAT isn't the only player in this new nicotine game. They're up against other major tobacco companies, all vying for market share.
Right, trying to capture those same consumers.
Like a high-stakes game of poker, with everyone betting big on these new products.
Exactly. And all this competition could lead to rapid innovation.
That's true.
Which is good for consumers
Yeah.
in terms of more product variety and potentially even lower prices.
Right.
But it also puts immense pressure on these companies to stay ahead of the curve.
They need to constantly be innovating and developing new products.
Absolutely, if they want to stay competitive.
But innovation costs money, and it doesn't always guarantee success. So how can investors evaluate whether BAT's gamble on these new products is likely to pay off?
Well, the Motley Fool article projects a 3-5% annual revenue growth for BAT fueled by these new products. And with expanding margins, earnings per share could grow 5-7% annually.
Okay, so those are some pretty healthy projections, but are they realistic?
Right. What could go wrong?
Yeah. What are the risks that investors need to consider?
Well, I think there are always risks, right?
Of course.
And in this case, they go beyond just the typical financial uncertainties.
Of course.
For example, if regulations become more stringent or public perception turns against these new products, BAT's growth projections could go up in smoke.
Right. And remember, the tobacco industry has a long history of being heavily regulated.
Right.
So it's not unreasonable to think that governments might eventually clamp down on these new products as well.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of competition.
Right.
If another company comes out with a truly groundbreaking product that captures the market, BAT could be left behind.
They could be left in the dust.
Yeah, it's a risky business for sure.
But of course, high risk can sometimes mean high reward.
That's
The article mentions that BAT currently has a dividend yield of 8.5%. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with dividend yields, that means you get back 8.5% of your investment each year just for holding the stock.
Wow, that's pretty generous.
It is. Combine that with their projected earnings growth,
Huh.
and you're looking at a potential annual return of almost 15% for investors.
Okay, so that's a pretty enticing prospect.
It is, especially in today's market. But before you rush out and buy a bunch of beat stock, It's crucial to remember that past performance is no guarantee of future results.
Exactly. Investing always involves risk.
Always.
And it's important to do your own research and make decisions that are right for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And perhaps even more importantly, it's worth considering the ethical implications of investing in a company like BA.
Right.
I mean, are you comfortable supporting an industry that has historically been associated with significant public health problems?
That's a good point.
Even if they're now promoting these potentially less harmful alternatives, it's a question each investor needs to grapple with based on their own values and beliefs. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's an important part of responsible investing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it really comes down to this. Do the potential financial gains outweigh the ethical concerns?
Yeah, that's the big question.
It's a decision that each listener needs to make for themselves.
Exactly. And, it's important to remember this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about real people's lives.
Right.
And the impact these products could have on public health.
So as you weigh the pros and cons of investing in B, here's something to think about. Imagine a future where these new nicotine products completely replace traditional cigarettes.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
What would that world look like?
Yeah. Would it be a healthier world?
Right, with fewer cases of lung cancer and heart disease.
Or would it just be a world where nicotine addiction persists?
Yeah.
Albeit in new and maybe more appealing forms.
And what about the social implications? Would these new products, which are often more discreet and socially acceptable than cigarettes, lead to a resurgence in nicotine use, maybe even among young people?
It's definitely something to consider.
It is. These are complex questions, and there are no easy answers.
Not at all.
But they're questions worth pondering as you learn more about British American Tobacco and their role in this changing landscape.
Absolutely.
This deep dive into BA has really revealed a company at a crossroads. They're dealing with a shrinking cigarette market while simultaneously trying to establish themselves as a leader in this new world of nicotine products.
Yeah, trying to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, it's a high-stakes gamble, and the outcome is far from certain.
For sure. What's clear, though, is that the tobacco industry is undergoing a major transformation.
Yeah.
And BAT is right in the middle of it.
They are. Whether they succeed or fail, the ripple effects will be felt far and wide.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up, here's a final thought. The choices we make as investors, as consumers, and as a society will shape the future of nicotine use. Will we embrace these new products as a harm reduction tool, or will we view them with caution, recognizing the potential for unintended consequences?
It's a question we all need to ask ourselves.
We do. The answer ultimately lies in our hands. It's up to each of us to stay informed, weigh the risks and benefits, and make choices that align with our values and our vision for a healthier future. That wraps up our deep dive into British American Tobacco. We hope you found it insightful, informative, and maybe even a bit thought-provoking. Till next time, stay curious and keep exploring.